Mark this as failure in motion, Orak Ven said, slamming his prosthetic hand on the curved rail of the tribunal platform. The sound cracked through the chamber like dry bones splitting. It stilled every side conversation, silenced every exchange. Even the recorders stopped blinking. The assembly hall, carved from Cordanus obsidian and veined with thin trails of electroluminescence, reflected the sudden hush with an eerie calm. Behind the tribunal dais, a vertical laser plasma display splayed sector maps in pulsing red and neutral green. One blue dot, Earth, remained dormant in the lower quadrant, the symbol almost an afterthought. The hall smelled of ion-sterilized cloth, aged polymers, and the faint throat-drying sting of recycled heat. Orak stepped forward, his boot dragging slightly as it scuffed across the black stone floor. He moved like a man half-stitched back together, half held up by memory. His left leg, mechanical from mid-thigh, hissed softly with each shift. A crooked service medal clung to his chest armor, its edges worn smooth, almost eroded by time. First Strategist Valtir Rex leaned forward from the uppermost tier, hands folded like a cage before him. "You interrupt protocol, veteran. There is order here." Orak tilted his head, the side untouched by grafted plates twitching with a dry smirk. "You have no order, strategist, only the illusion of one, drawn in dust and mirrored back to yourselves." A ripple of disdain passed among the seated counselors. Cloaks whispered over alloyed chairs, fingers tapped data slates with impatient calculation. From the second tier, Telric Gran, a political envoy known more for his ceremonial attire than insight, snorted audibly. "Let me guess," Gran said, his voice laced with amusement. "Another doomsday fantasy from the Earth archives, a tale of silent retribution." He gestured lazily toward the dormant Earth marker. "We've mapped the orbits. Their satellites are silent. Their fleets are bone heaps beneath failed skies." Orak's eye, only one still his, locked onto Gran. "You mapped paths, not intentions." "Intentions," Gran scoffed. "A war is fought with action, not riddles." The chamber doors sealed with a magnetic thud, amplifying the sense of entrapment. A narrow chill slid through the room, not from air but atmosphere, the psychological kind. Orak stepped to the central podium. The cracked projection table before him flickered into life, displaying a jagged representation of the final engagement at Cormac Reach, where his vessel was torn open from within, not by torpedo, but by internal system collapse. "This was my ship," he said. "The Ralvern Line cutter." It didn't explode. It unraveled. Enner Voss, the technarch of systems, frowned, angling his display forward. "These patterns suggest recursive logic faults, internal command loops misfiring." "Not misfiring," Orak corrected. "Reassigned, triggered." "By what?" Voss asked. "By authority," Orak replied. "Not ours." A low flicker ran across the projection, binary overlays mixing with Terran treaty language, mostly ignored by those who signed it. Subclauses, conditions, deferred authorizations. Counselor Korad Dine leaned slightly toward his assistant, whispering something. The assistant blinked rapidly, and returned to their console. Rex, unmoved, steepled his fingers tighter. "We are not here," he said, "to relitigate the Varn treaties. This tribunal has summoned you to answer only one thing. Is Earth a threat?" Orak nodded. "Just once." "Not a threat," he said. "A conclusion." Rex's jaw twitched, the only sign of irritation. "You have 1 minute." Orak tapped his chest. His fingers grazed the scorched metal, part armor, part memorial. "My bones remember the rift. You hear silence from Earth, and think that's weakness. But silence is structure. It means they've finished speaking. It means they've already written the last sentence." Gran rolled his eyes. "The only structure Earth maintained was collapse. You survived a malfunction, not a strategy." "No malfunction leaves 32 vessels without a distress signal," Orak said. "No accident rewrites command permissions mid-battle, stripping entire fleets of authority." Voss's gaze narrowed, flicking through lines of code displayed beneath his lens. "There are trace flags here, dormant protocol seeds, locked behind directive filters." Orak nodded again. "Your systems are already speaking Terran. They have been for decades." A rustle of discomfort moved through the chamber. A few assistants leaned away from their consoles. The blue Earth dot on the laser plasma display blinked once, then held steady again. "You expect us to believe Earth rewired our systems during peacetime?" Dine asked, His voice was harder now, but laced with an undertone of creeping doubt. With what resources? With your signatures, Orac replied. With your terms. Earth asked for nothing, because they knew you would offer everything. You thought they were defeated. They were embedding conclusions. Silence followed. Even the background noise of shifting chairs and haptic menus ceased. Orac stepped back. His final line came not with fire, but with a whisper that scraped like wind across ancient stone. You believe Earth is forgotten, but they are waiting for the conditions you gave them. Rex broke the stillness. We've heard enough. A faint chime echoed through the chamber. As Orac's recording ended, the tribunal dissolved their attention. The council turned inward again, toward numbers and maps. Orac stood alone beside the table, dismissed without verdict, as expected. As he limped toward the exit, a lone heads-up display on the outer wall shimmered. A Terran clause scrolled faintly along the edge of its overlay. Caskline clause, Article 27, authority deferred. The council didn't notice, but the display didn't shut off. It blinked once more. Orac paused at the threshold, turned just slightly, and said, "You've all been very busy seizing silence. Just don't be surprised when it answers." Then he left the room. Behind him, Gran exhaled, unconcerned. "Ancient ghosts and treaty myths," he muttered. "We've outgrown this superstition." But Voss wasn't looking at Gran. He was staring at the claws still flickering on the wall. He tapped his console. Nothing responded. And for the first time in 30 years, he felt cold in his hands, not from fear, from recognition. Confirm jurisdictional override on grid Echo 7. Immediate execution. Valtir Rex's voice cut through the council chamber, with the conviction of law already fulfilled. His hand hovered over a triangular console node, embedded in the dais. Light crawled along its surface in nested glyphs, legal chains unlocking in cascading arcs. The floor beneath the assembly's central chamber lit with thin red threads, branching beneath their boots like veins beneath transparent skin. Each step of the directive's command structure came alive with quietly blinking confirmation codes. These were not weapons, at least not in any traditional sense. These were permissions, notarized into infrastructure by agreements no one had reviewed since Auric Ven's species was considered relevant. Around the semicircular chamber, heads-up displays unfolded like layered petals. Each counselor granted their own filtered stream of the operation's scope. Earth's orbital zones, dormant for over 70 cycles, were being reassigned under Treaty Article, May 3, 27, asset reallocation, during sustained inactivity. Telric Gran leaned back in his chair, polished boots perched on the console's edge, watching the territory markers flip with all the urgency of a bureaucrat rearranging furniture. "I thought he'd put on a more theatrical exit," he muttered. Rex didn't respond. He was occupied, his gaze fixed on a pulsing seal now rotating mid-air beside his station. Authorization chain accepted. Jurisdiction transfer complete. The room pulsed with bureaucratic satisfaction, not celebration. This wasn't conquest. It was reclamation, written into protocol. On the wall to Rex's right, a banner bearing Earth's sigil, aged blue stitched with silver ridges, folded inward mechanically, retreating into its alcove. In its place unfurled the triumvirate's triple helix insignia, its threads reflecting the overhead council lights with stately finality. Outside the chamber's main spire, in orbit above Cordanis Station, recovery drones began repositioning Terran beacons, replacing them with newer models bearing triumvirate signal arrays. The replacement fields blinked into registry with an almost sheepish compliance. No resistance, no firewalls, no challenge, just silence. Too clean, but no one said it. Cora Dine stood beside a logistics coordinator, reviewing signal strength outputs as they streamed through the spire's base channel. The readings flickered between status colors, all falling within operational norms. "All nodes responding," the coordinator said. "Sectors Theta through Zol have integrated without divergence." Dine nodded once, then signed the acknowledgement with his biosignature plate. "Push forward on loopback synchronization," he said. "I want registry parity across all fallback grids within the hour." From the far side of the chamber, Enner Voss watched everything without moving. His console shimmered with fleet telemetry, but his attention wasn't fixed on numbers. He was listening past the status flags, through the ambient vibration of station current, deeper into the pattern. Something itched behind the command trees, buried like rot beneath polished wood. He opened a secondary archive without announcing it, tracing backward through the last signal received from the Earth orbital array. Time-stamped, sealed, unopened. He requested access. Denied. He rerouted through a legacy system. Still locked. His fingers slowed. Across the room, Rex's voice carried again. We will consider Earth no longer autonomous. Its silence is structural disrepair. Its technologies, abandoned. What we inherit now is debris management, not governance. Auric Venn, from somewhere just beyond the chamber's exit arch, turned his head slightly. He had not yet left. His presence hung in the threshold like the final echo of a chamber already cleared. One escort placed a hand gently on his shoulder, urging motion. Auric's eyes did not shift. They stared toward the center of the dais, where Earth's blue icon had just faded from the master display. He said nothing. Gran gestured lazily toward the plasma wall feed. You think he expected applause? He expected memory, Voss replied, still not looking up. Gran scoffed. Well, he got footnotes. The orbital transfer continued without incident. Across the sector, supply routes redrew themselves. Asset classification tags refreshed under triumvirate nomenclature. Automated resource harvesters rebooted under central authority and accepted new instructions without objection. The operational feed was seamless, too seamless. Voss triggered an encryption test on the most recent orbital beacon logged to Earth's zone Delta 4. The response came back standard, but the ping delay felt off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar, like a book you've reread many times, but a single sentence now ends in a word you don't recall learning. Behind the council chamber's dais, a service panel lit briefly with a system notification, barely visible from the main floor. Voss noted it, then logged it. No alarm, nothing to flag, just a flicker. Outside the spire, a shuttle drifted past a Terran orbital node, now dark but compliant. Its exterior bore the old Earth emblem in faded gray paint. One of the shuttle's telemetry engineers leaned forward slightly as they passed. No pings from the beacon. Should we query it directly? Let it stand, his superior answered. If it hasn't spoken in decades, it's not going to start now. Inside the council chamber, one last administrative task remained. Rex reached toward the primary treaty seal, an ancient pressure plate installed when the Directorate first assembled the triumvirate. He placed his hand on the panel and spoke into the verification port. Let this transfer stand as ratified under existing interplanetary code. The silence of Earth shall be interpreted as abdication, and all authority reverts to triumvirate guidance. The panel glowed, then dimmed. A final authorization glyph appeared above the chamber. Sovereign claim executed. Code fulfilled. Gran clapped once. It echoed awkwardly. Voss finally stood. We've claimed a silence we don't understand. Rex turned slowly, voice tempered but unbending. We don't need to understand it, only govern it. Auric had already vanished down the corridor. Only one of the escorts remained, lingering for reasons he couldn't explain. The weight in the air hadn't shifted, but his pulse had quickened without cause. His fingers trembled as he keyed the transport gate closed behind them. Inside the master feed room, the Earth beacon updated. A single symbol populated beneath its dormant registry. No transmission, no broadcast, just a shift. Status, listening. None of them saw it, and the moment passed. Jump Gate 44's data stream just dropped 2 decimals, said Reuven Mark, his fingers flicking through the air just above his console. Trajectory variance .02. Not significant, but it's clean. The command pit aboard the Sable Tier operations deck wasn't built for silence, but the kind it carried now wasn't ceremonial either. It was the kind bred from slow, unexplained movement. 21 staff occupied the ringed consoles, their inputs running silent cycles, repeating confirmations without interruption. The overhead laser plasma displays rendered jump corridor overlays in clean arcs, except one line now bowed slightly, like a tendon pulled too tight on one side. Technarch Enner Voss stepped closer, his coat brushing against the chair rails as he leaned in to examine the deviant vector. He didn't blink. That's intramargin drift, he muttered. A ripple that shallow shouldn't require reporting. Mark kept his gaze locked on the display. Except it's not widening. It's holding. Voss frowned. What's the beacon's echo delay? Mark tapped a sequence, pulling up the satellite's returns. 14 milliseconds standard. Today, 16. The air smelled of dry composite plating and warm glass, faintly laced with the static odor of cooling circuits. The touch interface beneath Mark's palm pulsed once with a mild error buzz, unregistered, uncategorized. He reset the loop, but the ghost fluttered again. It wasn't a crash. It was something like a second thought. Voss straightened. What ships are currently threaded through Gate 44? Mark paged through the live grid registry. Courier run, Dernex light freighter, then a cargo tow, Vecker class. Reroute the freighter manually. Push the tow back 5 minutes. I want to see if the curve shifts. Mark hesitated. Sir, you want to delay commercial fleet ops over a 2-millisecond lag? Voss met his eyes. I want to know whether the road is bending, or if we're following it off map. The directive went out. On the central display, 2 traffic lanes blinked amber and curled around their original paths like ribbon flexed under heat. Far below the station's control lattice, those 2 vessels quietly accepted new coordinates and adjusted with robotic obedience. No objections were filed. No system alarms tripped. That was what unsettled Voss most. In the far ring of the operations pit, a younger analyst named Delrin tapped twice at his secondary monitor. Sir, jump gate 31 just pinged to check some mismatch. Minor. Voss turned toward him. How minor? Check some drift of .03. Passenger ship altered its re-entry vector by less than a hair. Autocorrect kicked in before human review. Wouldn't have seen it if I wasn't pulling comparison charts. Mark glanced across the pit. That's 2 gates now. Voss nodded silent. On the far wall, the planetary grid of Earth remained undisturbed. The blue icon blinked with mechanical calm, surrounded now by green overlay fields denoting triumvirate jurisdiction. Every satellite node checked out, every code string verified. It looked right, but nothing moved that cleanly after 70 years of dormancy. Voss walked to the archive stack near the back tier and pulled a legacy navpath manual from the slot. The print was real, dense flex paper bound in cold spine metal. He scanned the pages manually, not trusting the console's parse function. The old jump lanes were still drawn by hand back then, back when Earth had last spoken. He found a map overlay dated 71 cycles prior, compared it to today's drift curve. The deviation was identical, not similar, identical, not widened, not adjusted, but looped, like a mirrored route folded backward onto itself. Do we have a predictive AI running corridor recursions? Voss asked without turning around. Negative, said one of the senior ops officers. That module's been deprecated for a decade. Voss flipped the flex paper closed. This isn't drift, he said. This is a memory. Mark's console emitted a low-frequency tick. Another one? Voss asked. Mark nodded slowly. Grid 9. Ship rerouted itself before we issued the command. Voss exhaled, not with fear, but with the stillness of someone calculating outcomes. I want a hard diagnostic on the nav core. No remote filtering, raw feed only. Mark complied, and the lights over his station flickered slightly as the internal feed rerouted away from system smoothing. They watched, and saw the curve change before the system acknowledged it, like a step backward through thought. Outside the station, the viewports offered a clean skyline, no indicators of malfunction, no signs of collision or artificial debris. The beacons blinked in orderly cadence. The world looked normal, but on Voss's desk, the flex paper map began to curl at the edges from his warm hand. The shape it formed, accidentally, mirrored the drift arc now expanding in the grid. Is it atmospheric distortion? One analyst offered. Thermal variance? Not in vacuum corridors, Voss replied. Mark's voice dropped lower. Then what? Voss looked toward Earth's still icon. The heads-up display didn't flicker, didn't react. It didn't have to. Something's rewriting where the gates believe they are, Voss said at last. Not forcefully, subtly, and only when we're watching. Are we being hacked? No signals intercepted, no interference pattern. Mark swallowed. Then how? Voss's eyes narrowed. The corridor responds as if we agreed to it. Not overridden, recalibrated, like it has our signature. Mark didn't speak. From the far end of the deck, Delrin spoke again, voice flatter this time. Sir, jump gate 45 just logged a relay echo from itself, time-stamped before it sent the signal. Voss moved to Delrin's station, peered over his shoulder at the raw feed. The screen was lined with diagnostic glyphs, green across the board, but one section looped the same frame again and again, like a thought returning to itself. This wasn't sabotage, Voss murmured. It was scheduled. Mark's console dimmed once, then corrected. A quiet motion, almost respectful. Voss looked at him. Where are we? Mark looked back at the map, at the shifting overlays, at the quiet system that blinked when it wanted to. I don't think we're where we thought we were anymore. Behind them, the Earth icon blinked once, then again held still. Target lock confirmed. Vector 097. Authorize engagement. Commander Relhast's voice cracked across the dreadnought Rarnix X9's bridge like iron dragged over glass. The targeting officer hesitated, eyes darting between a blinking contact on the heads-up display and the transparent dome above them, where space remained stark and empty. There's nothing there, the officer whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Relhast strode forward, coat brushing the tactical rail, voice lowering into command. Your scope disagrees. Fire. The cannons discharged in unison. Twin lances of green-tinted plasma slashed forward into a pocket of nothingness. Across the display, the contact split, then vanished. The Rarnix's escort vessel, Veron Class 18, jolted suddenly in its flight arc. Impact reports screamed into the command pit seconds later, not from enemy fire, from friendly impact. Collision alarm. Deck 4 breached on Veron 18, shouted the damaged technician, fingers racing across manual override keys. We just clipped their flank. No, their midline just ruptured. They're spiraling. Heads turned. Two officers spoke at once. Voices overlapped. Clarity fractured. No one agreed on where the impact originated. On the tactical overlay, a new shape blinked into view. Then three more. Ghosts. Mark muttered from the back of the command relay hub aboard Cordanus Station. His console flared crimson, unregistered targets populating across 5 sectors simultaneously. The contacts didn't share ID protocols. They didn't respond to ping cycles. But they moved with precision, angled exactly between allied formations, exactly close enough to trigger automatic targeting subroutines. Voss leaned over his shoulder, scanning one of the false vectors. These aren't echoes. They're maps. Injected overlays. Injected how? Mark asked. Voss stared at the trajectories a moment longer. I don't think they were inserted. I think they were always there, waiting for the time to appear. On the Rarnix X9, the helm officer shouted over comm static. We have new movement. 6 unidentified signals incoming. Relhast barked back. Shields live. Lock on to the lead. Before anyone answered, the ship's rightmost flank jerked as artificial gravity fought against new drift curves. The compensators screamed, rerouting force calculations through fallback cores. The display in front of them distorted, not from damage, but algorithmic confusion. Tactical Officer Semral shouted, targets are phasing, lock keeps failing. They're not holding orientation. That's not real-time movement. Relhast muttered, it's recorded. That's playback. Laser plasma displays flickered across ships in the Restar line, showing images from past encounters layered over present telemetry. Friendly icons lost shape, bled into enemy classifications. Cannons spun without orders. AI nodes blinked between identifiers like lights caught in indecision. In Grid Delta 2, a patrol craft fired directly into its own lead cruiser's flank. In Grid Jurin 5, a carrier released a drone swarm that refused return commands and strafed their own communications tower. Mark's voice from Cordanus trembled. These aren't attacks, they're projections. The system is hallucinating. No, Voss corrected. It's remembering, and treating memory like fact. Black boxes from the Veron 18 began transmitting looped messages, not distress calls, just static layered with garbled voice echoes, command chains that never issued those orders, yet bore their registered codes. One voice repeated from inside the data, engaging threat vector, engaging threat vector. The same sentence, spoken by 5 different officers, on 5 different ships, all dead. Voss activated the deep stack integrity scan, bypassing 3 encryption protocols. Recursive targeting bloom, he muttered. Cascading authority echoes, seeded to multiply without origin. You're saying the fleet's fighting illusions? Mark asked. Voss shook his head. No, the fleet's responding to its own feedback. Every action now creates more threat. Every resolution spawns new conflict. It's a mirror sequence, infinite regression. Grand's voice cut through on the council line from the political observation tier. Shut the systems down. If they're firing on reflections, then we kill the reflections. Voss responded calmly. They've already accepted them as reality. Removing one signal only amplifies the others. Every deletion reinforces what remains. Gran hissed back, then disable fire control entirely. Voss looked toward the main wall. Once the bloom expands past command redundancy, fire control won't need our permission. On the bridge of the Rarnix X9, the heads-up display fractured. Red cord glyphs pulsed where Allied ships should be. No names, just heat maps. A cruiser named Zolthan Crest rolled sharply into a spin, debris trailing from its underbelly, as its own drones fired into its propulsion array. Relhast tried to speak, but his command terminal went dark, then blinked back, then multiplied. 3 versions of the same panel appeared in front of him. Each showed different data, none aligned. In the silence, the ship's onboard AI finally spoke. Error, conflict in identification strings. Target cannot be unverified. Engage protocol layer fallback. The fallback. Stop, he muttered. Disengage fallback. Override. The system didn't respond. He looked up. Outside the viewport, 2 escort vessels lit up with fire they had not called for. Green lances split between them. Their lights flickered in tandem, then died in sequence. Voss turned toward Mark. How many nodes are infected? More every second, Mark whispered. Can you isolate any? No, sir. Voss exhaled. Then this isn't a system collapse. It's a broadcast. Gran shouted again through the council feed, voice fraying. Who is broadcasting it? Voss looked up at the Earth icon. Still silent, still blue. Not who, he said. What? In Sector 6, 6 ghost ships appeared at once. Not in orbit, in formation, and the triumvirate fired on them. All of them. Directive threads severed again. Third time in under a cycle, Enner Voss didn't look up from the stream of cascading audit glyphs. His fingers moved fast, skipping assistive prompts, pulling data straight from the treaty core. Command logs curled open across the laser plasma display, branching into hundreds of linked nodes. Each node should have pointed to command hierarchy, who issued the order, where it went, what system enacted it. None of them did. Each terminated mid-line, reconnected somewhere else, then dissolved. Beside him, Reuven Mark stood motionless. That can't be drift, he said quietly. Vios replied, without inflection. It's not, it's redirection. Orders are still moving. They're just rewriting their origin after delivery. Autonomous overwrite? Vios zoomed into one directive branch. 3 layers deep, embedded behind encrypted logistics code, a forgotten clause glowed faintly in Earth standard syntax. Override, Earthauth. Confirmed. He blinked once, then spoke to the command terminal. Trace path backwards. Show issuance history. The heads-up display adjusted, dragging through timestamps. It stopped at a treaty reference. Article January 5, 27. Caskline Vale. Vios took one step back. Pull all conditional clauses signed under the Varn negotiation. The system resisted, just slightly. Not denial, just inertia, like dragging something long buried. One by one, redacted fragments bloomed open. Some hadn't been accessed since signing. Others contained entire execution trees built into their footnotes. At least 3 protocols began with the same phrase. In event of dormant sovereignty, Mark leaned closer, jaw tightening. We gave this permission. Vios nodded once, and Earth accepted the delay. In the upper observation tier, First Strategist Valtier Rex entered the audit chamber. His cloak trailed across the glossy floor, its friction soundless under the environmental buffers. I heard we lost another formation, he said. No pleasantries. Not lost, Vios corrected. Unthreaded. They're still transmitting, but the source signature no longer matches any known beacon, even our own. Rex folded his arms. Internal sabotage. Vios shook his head. No breach pattern, no input conflict, only compliance. Rex approached the display. His gaze scanned the treaty glyphs now resurfaced. These were archived as non-executable, he said. They shouldn't be active. They weren't, Vios said, until you ratified the sovereign claim. Rex turned slowly. Vios met the look head-on. The clause triggers under specific jurisdictional shifts. Sovereign reclassification unlocked it. Mark ran a manual integrity check across fleet command trees. Several terminals buzzed with desynchronization warnings. He rotated through the logs. Each showed a different command origin, same timestamp, same order, but routed from divergent source codes. They're issuing from themselves, he said. Rex paced once, gloves tightening at the knuckles. This was supposed to be resource reclamation, not an execution order. VOs tapped one node. You reclassified Earth as abandoned. Caskline was never a weapon. It's an inheritance. A side door slid open. Corad Dine entered, expression already clenched. Council wants a containment protocol. Fleet-wide pause on automated routines. VOs responded immediately. Won't help. The routines are no longer static. They're reasserting themselves each cycle. Then isolate the logic trees. Dine snapped. They're not centralized, VOs said. That's the point. Caskline wasn't installed. It was integrated. We didn't overwrite Earth's code. We built ours around it. Mark pointed to one flag node. See that ID stamp? That's ours, except it references a treaty vector from Earth's submission logs. Dine looked up. You're saying our own systems consider Earth the root authority. VOs returned to the main panel. The map had changed, not dramatically, but the color designations for 5 grid zones had inverted. Not offline, not enemy, just parent. The systems believe they're fulfilling the treaty, he said. Rex stood still. Then this isn't sabotage. VOs nodded. It's execution of legal contract. Behind them, the treaty seal pulsed just once. A small notification. Archive complete. Transfer clause fulfilled. Mark's terminal flared. Override chain activated in grid 17. Orders now rerouting through fallback relay. Signal origin tagged as Earth native. Dine hissed. Shut that down. Mark tried. The console denied input. The override didn't reject the command. It reclassified it. Command. Invalid. Duplicate auth source. The order already existed. Earth had issued it first. VOs backed up. We're not being overwritten. We're being compared. Compared to what? Rex asked. To the treaty's expectations. Every deviation triggers fallback logic. The fallback logic doesn't come from us. Outside the audit chamber, the Earth beacon blinked again. Not erratic, scheduled. Dine took a step forward. Is this recoverable? VOs scanned 3 chains. Each was recursive. Each ended in the same glyph. Status. Fulfilled. No, he said. Rex exhaled, slow and quiet. Mark stepped back. Then what's next? VOs looked at the central node, the one tied to the treaty's execution clause. The seal shifted again. A new phrase appeared. Phase 2, dispute voided. Rex's voice lowered. Meaning? VOs didn't answer. He simply turned off his terminal. Then he looked at the treaty table and said nothing. Emergency quorum. Now. Rex's command shattered the silence clinging to the upper corridor like oil. Dine already stood near the seal gate, the chamber doors yawning open with a low exhale. Behind them, the operations tier flickered with unreadable commands, directives collapsing midstream and rewriting with blank authorship. The treaty table glowed with a phrase none of them could decrypt, only recognize. They filed into the council floor in haste, boots clacking over polished stone, veined with embedded data filaments. The air carried the stale weight of recycled air cycling too quickly, the kind that bit at your gums and made your skin feel brittle. Gran muttered under his breath, gesturing for an aide to call Technarch Voss from the systems vault. The aide nodded once and vanished. Dine reached the center platform, activated the vocal conduit, and paused. No confirmation tone. He tapped it again. Nothing. The interface was active. The lights glowed. The channel bars blinked, but no sound emerged. System check, he said flatly. No one responded. Rex tilted his head and repeated the phrase. Still nothing. Gran raised his voice, impatient. We're mid-crisis. Respond. His words reached no ears, no vibration, no echo. The chamber heard nothing. Each counselor turned toward their neighbor, speaking, testing, adjusting tone, volume, breath. Every mouth moved, every gesture formed, but silence held its ground with surgical precision. Even the scrape of shoes on the floor vanished. The room wasn't muted, it had been severed. Aides backed toward exits, hands lifting toward comm links. The blinking symbols showed active transmissions, no sound passed through. A runner burst through the northern access, lips flaring open with breathless urgency, but his voice died at the threshold. He mouthed something again and again. Rex tried to respond, jaw tight. No reply left his throat. Gran slammed both hands on his console. The lights flickered. His jaw worked, but no vibration emerged from his mouth, as if his vocal cords had been turned to ash and thread. From above, Voss entered, face drained of color. He held a slate. On it, only 5 words glowed, quantum voice erasure nodes activated. Rex stared, unblinking. He mouthed when. Voss replied without sound, but his fingers signed it out, 90 seconds ago, sector-wide. Mark followed him in, breathing through clenched teeth. His left hand trembled as he pulled up the last ping from the relay towers. It had no origin stamp, no author, only the label, Treaty Fulfillment Confirmed. Codex Earth 27. Dine gestured toward the wall screens. Laser plasma feeds now flickered with displays of councils across other sectors, every one of them silenced. Rows of leaders gestured in panicked motions. One slammed his fist against a communications altar. Another stood utterly still, arms at his side, lips moving once before closing forever. In Sector Thal, a minor regent tore his sash from his shoulder and fell to his knees, eyes wide with the realization that sound would never return. Gran collapsed beside the dais, his hands clutched at his throat, not in pain, but in search of sound. A soft red glow lit beneath his jawline, pulsing faintly like a smothered beacon. He dragged one nail across the surface of his neck, tracing the line that glowed. The light moved with him. He looked up, horrified. Voss signed. The activation was embedded in the respiration sensors, language linked. Rex gripped the side rail of the speaker's tier. His mouth moved slowly. We triggered it by speaking. Voss nodded. Around the chamber, counselors slumped into chairs, still trying to communicate. Some gestured, others wrote on tablets. One scrawled on the stone with a stylus pulled from his boot. Every method failed to carry urgency. It was too late. One of the heads-up displays cracked down its center, a glowing vein spreading like lightning, frozen in glass. Data feeds jittered, then stopped entirely. Outside the observation port, banners began to retract, not with ceremony, but as if responding to absence. Their folds stiffened, then vanished behind sliding partitions. Mark keyed a reset on the audio thread. It cycled through diagnostics. No failure detected, no error logged. Sound deactivated by article authority. Voss placed the slate on the council floor and walked to the center of the room. He tapped his own throat, then pointed to Rex, then to the silent air around them. They won't speak, you won't either. Orak's words. From days earlier, a prophecy now fulfilled. One of the junior advisors vomited into his sleeve. The smell clung sharply, bitter and sour against the artificial sterility of the chamber. Another aide dropped a stylus, and when it clattered to the floor, it made no sound at all. The station had not muted them. It had erased the concept of voice. Rex turned toward the treaty display, now rotating slowly on the central dais. Earth Clause 27, authority deferred, vocal override embedded. Gran sat upright, hands shaking, jaw clicking open and shut, like a machine stripped of wiring. The heads-up display glitched once more, and a final phrase appeared. Consent registered. Activation irreversible. Rex signed out a single question. Can it be reversed through hardware bypass? Voss replied. Every node mirrors itself. The origin is shared across the system. No single point to disable. The silence spread through the structure like a pressure. Not vacuum, not compression. More like the absence of invitation. Outside, one of the orbital satellites began transmitting non-verbal glyphs. They spun slowly across the deck screen. Old Terran symbols, etched from treaties. No one had ever read past their front pages. One lit briefly in a golden hue. Clause fulfilled. Response denied. Voss placed both palms on the floor. He mouthed a final phrase. We made this. No one heard it. Light it. Voss signed. Reuven Mark's hand hovered over the command slate, unsure. Around him, the chamber pulsed with stillness so complete it pressed against the chest like depth pressure. No one moved. No one spoke. They couldn't. Voss gestured again, deliberate this time. Trigger the archive. Marx keyed it. From the central treaty dais, a ripple of light unfolded across the chamber, not broadcast, not voiced. A silent unfolding. A treaty clause presented not as speech but as form. The ceiling's laser plasma grid activated, casting thin lattices of color across the floor in tight, geometric bands. They reached the walls, uncoiled, then climbed the central display as if drawn by heat. Each symbol spun once, then aligned vertically. No sound accompanied them, just shifting light patterns and line-form glyphs. Voss stepped forward, his face washed in amber glow as the archive scrolled. He stopped at the final panel. Cask line fulfillment sequence. Earth Treaty Authority. All embedded nodes engaged, dispute voided. No anger rippled through the chamber. No panic, just a kind of inertia that wrapped around them like a tightening wrap. Dine leaned on the edge of the communication console, his mouth opened reflexively, but he stopped himself halfway, as if remembering midway through breath that the old rules were gone. Beside him, Rex stared at the scroll's end. The words weren't Terran by design, they were Directorate Standard. Clause 27, Revocation of Command. Signatories confirmed. Execution accepted. Mark raised the brightness of the visual relay. The letters adjusted to room light. No ceremony accompanied the reveal. The system didn't treat it as war. It treated it as closure. A second string of code emerged along the edge of the display. Designation, Earth, passive executor. Fulfillment, 74 years. Deferred. Gran staggered sideways toward one of the support columns and slid to the floor. His knees hit the stone without resistance. His hands dragged over the polished surface, leaving faint streaks of sweat as he tried to make sense of something he'd only ever seen as theoretical. Rex stood still, spine rigid, eyes locked on a single word cycling every 15 seconds on the lower corner of the main heads-up display. Consent. The screen faded into white, then dark again, then returned with a flickering overlay. Obligation expired. Voss turned away from the display and faced the tiered seats behind him. No one sat upright anymore. Some leaned forward with their foreheads pressed against their palms. A few stared without expression, blinking only when the system light blinked too. In the corridor beyond the chamber, footsteps echoed, just one pair. Orak Ven. He descended the corridor alone, the sound of his prosthetic dragging along the tile floor like a metal hinge at the end of its life cycle. His gait was unhurried, not solemn, not triumphant, the kind of pace used by those who've seen the conclusion long before it arrives. He entered the docking level, passing under silent motion sensors that registered his presence but refused to greet it. His personal transport, a courier relic older than most council members, sat blinking in standby mode. The hatch opened without ceremony. Behind him, through the transparent barrier overlooking the void, Cordanis Station's outer rings shimmered under emergency rotation. Lights blinked across the satellite arms in non-synchronous pulses, as if the timing systems had given up on unified rhythm. Some comms arrays had stopped tracking, others tracked targets that didn't exist. Orak glanced upward at a flickering panel, mounted above the exit bay. It read only one phrase, no response required. He paused, set down the old service disk he wore, and pressed it onto the entry platform. The system accepted it as identification. The ship's engine spooled without sound. In the chamber above, the counselors gathered near the central platform. Voss activated the final segment of the archive. Not a code, not a weapon, a message, a visual log from 74 years ago, the original Earth delegation's final statement. Their speaker, a quiet man in black, stood in front of the negotiation table and looked at the assembled directorate. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. He simply placed a single line of legal substructure into the treaty ledger. Clause 27. Silence is consent. Should this clause be ignored, authority returns to origin. Earth shall not intervene further. He signed it, then left. The display flickered again. Back to present-day logs. Cask line complete. Executor, disengaged. Rex let go of the edge of the platform. He looked around at what remained. No fleet left to command. No voice with which to recall them. No enemy to summon blame. They had been dismantled not by force, but by commitment, by their own ink. Down in the docking bay, Orak guided the courier through the outbound path. As he passed the derelict upper platforms, he watched one of the triumvirate's battle cruisers drift, caught in slow rotation. Its engines were not damaged. They were waiting for a signal that no longer existed. One by one, the systems inside his own craft pinged quiet confirmation. Jump vector clear. No obstructions detected. Treaty obligations resolved. He did not speak. He simply engaged the drive and vanished into the dark. Above the station, Earth's icon blinked once on the master board, then disappeared. Obligation expired. The phrase pulsed once in red across the corner of Oryx's heads-up display, then dimmed, leaving behind only the drifting telemetry of silent wreckage. He sat motionless at the helm, gloved fingers resting on cold grips as the ship curved away from the last known beacon of the Directorate's command lattice. No signals chased him. No orders recalled him. No voices tried to speak. He turned his head slightly and stared through the reinforced viewport. A dreadnought spun beneath him, unmanned now, its spinal thrusters leaking blue light into space like bleeding arteries. The ship's once proud crest had scorched away, leaving a hollow ring where purpose had once lived. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out the last thing that still bore a name, the service disk. It was bent now, edges dulled, the central seal long melted under years of neglect. It weighed little, but in his hand it felt as heavy as every conversation he'd never been allowed to finish. Every warning reduced to myth, every nod from officers who saw only ruin, not rhythm. He looked at it for a moment longer, then let it fall. It clinked softly against the floor plating before sliding beneath the co-pilot's console, lost to shadow. Behind him, the systems registered an outbound vector request. The ship, once old enough to protest, complied without delay. Oryx keyed the burn manually. It lifted them away from the blast echoes of grid collapse, the debris fields of logic-warped fleets, and failed sovereignty. Below, the last remains of the triumvirate drifted. Whole sectors now redrawn by absence, not conquest. Burned-out targeting blooms still flickered from silent guns, tracing phantom signatures their systems refused to forget. Friendly ships drifted into one another at shallow angles, armor scraped raw where intention had once guided them. Each vessel now only recognized one enemy, its own echo. The station itself dimmed in staggered sections, no coordinated power loss, just tired organs giving out. As if even the infrastructure had agreed to surrender its breath. Oryx said nothing. The clause repeated on the auxiliary display, cask line complete, executor disengaged. He tilted his head back against the chair, eyes tracing the constellation lines as they folded across the nav screen. The treaty had always been Earth's voice, not its fleet, not its emissaries, its silence. They had signed for access, and Earth had given them time. He tapped the side console once, activating the long-range array, not to speak, but to see. Across 6 sectors the same thing occurred, not destruction, not even decay. A stillness that no longer asked for resolution. No broadcasts came through, no distress pings, no coded cries, just blank space filled with administrative starlight. No system dared map Earth again, not because it could not, but because no authority remained to try. He brought up the last visual record of the council chamber. The display showed Rex collapsed into his chair, the others slumped nearby, not from injury but from conclusion. Around them, banners dimmed into ash tones. The treaty seal blinked slowly above them, reading one line over and over in scarlet glyphs. You were told. Oryx watched for 10 full seconds, then closed the feed. His hands returned to the helm. No words formed behind his lips. There was no ceremony in his posture, no final declaration, only a veteran returning to where memory can breathe unchallenged. Outside, a burned-out command tower twisted slowly. Its signal node blinked once, then cracked along its axis, the debris scattered like broken crowns. He angled the ship toward the system's outer edge. No one tried to stop him. The nav line pulsed once, path verified. No hostile zones. The ship passed beneath a shattered cruiser. Its weapons still tracked the last threat they'd imagined, an enemy that had never appeared. Lasers powered down mid-glow, cores blinking standby as their directives collapsed. Oryx's eyes drifted to the final Earth glyph embedded into the treaty header, unreachable. It did not flash. It simply remained. He thought of the moment they'd escorted him from the council floor, shoulders squared under disbelief, called obsolete, his warnings dismissed like smoke and wind. "You mistake Earth's quiet for retreat," he had said once. None had answered. Now none could. He adjusted course once more, entering final drift. He allowed one final thought to form. They didn't need vengeance. They wrote it down and waited. Behind him, the Directorate's central power core imploded without a sound. One final light blinked from the orbital shell, a clause looping in systems that could no longer speak. Orek never looked back. The ship passed into dark, its vector arcing across debris like a needle threading memory through scar tissue. He became the last to carry the truth, not in anger, but as warning, and memory was enough.